Hi everybody and welcome back. Thank you once again for your good wishes and kind remarks. I think you noticed in yesterday's video that my timing, my timeline, my days are a bit off, and I apologize for that. I'm doing my best. As you know, I'm traveling back and forth between my hometown and neighboring town to see the doctors and get treatment. And then, of course, we still have load shedding, and it appears our hometown also now has some electrical problems, so we have additional hours of darkness or without electricity, and I'm thus finding it very difficult to stick to some kind of routine and also to catch up with the latest news. But I am doing my best and I will catch up and we'll get there again soon. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to go back to where we left off in Harold's book because I really want to get to the nitty-gritty of the pregnancies and particularly draw parallels between Harold's descriptions of the pregnancies and the birth and his perceptions of his wife's alleged pregnancies. And then I will draw that in line with some known facts. Now, according to Harold, both him and Mog wanted to start a family straight away. But that is not what he said during the engagement interview, was it? When asked about children towards the end of the interview, Harold answered, "No, not currently, no. No, of course you know. I think you know. One step at a time, and hopefully we'll start a family in the future." Now, with so many no's in one sentence, Harold certainly did not sound like a man wanting to hurtle into a pregnancy and fatherhood a month or two, three after the wedding. Maybe he wanted to explore a bit more with the new wife. Who knows? Because very soon Mog was indeed supposedly pregnant. So, according to Harold, at one point they spend a lovely weekend with Pa in Scotland at the Castle of May, where Pa discovered that Mog shared a birthday with his most favourite relative, his grandmother, the Queen Mother. It was also the weekend Harold discovered the magic of Mog when she sang to the seals. Of course, Harold thought it was magic, but also learned that it was a sure way of luring the seals to their death. Now, I know Harold did not intend it that way when he wrote the book or when he inserted that piece into the book, but in my opinion, and taking into account what had happened afterwards and is still happening, I think that was rather significant and prophetic, don't you think? And then what I've been waiting for. Mog was indeed late. She bought 2 home tests. Harold waited for her in bed while she was in the bathroom completing the tests, and according to Harold, he fell asleep. Now, how excited could Harold have been if he fell asleep while his wife was in the bathroom doing a pregnancy test? I sincerely submit that I don't think that he was all that excited. Anyway, he says when he woke up, the wands were on the nightstand next to the blue box with his mom's hair in it. Now, folks, that is already semi-insane. Anyway, it showed 2 blue lines, so Harold thanked the magic Selkies, or then the Scottish mermaids, or then, as we now know in reality, the seals, and he thanked Mummy. Oy vey. Now, guys, you see, if one draws such a conclusion or parallel once or twice or three times in your lifetime. It's normal. We all have different beliefs and we all have different things we do when we're grateful or when we're desperate. But this constant narrative of pulling his dead mommy into absolutely every situation is not normal. It is indeed, in a way, rather insane. But before I move on, I want to just stand still for a second and quote something else Harold wrote. One night over pre-dinner cocktails, Fred Astaire playing in the background, it emerged that Meg shared a birth date with Pa's favorite person, Gan Gan. Well, you see, they may share a birth date, but the wording is incorrect. King Charles never called the Queen Mother Gan Gan, nor did anyone else. William and later Harry called the Queen Gary, as for a while William battled with Granny and called her Gary instead, so the nickname stuck. But it was Prince George who called the Queen Gan Gan, having battled with the word granny or grandmother. So once again, Harold goes and he borrows something from another family member. In this case, he is borrowing from little George. Then Harold actually admits to basically announcing the pregnancy at Eugenie's wedding reception, first to his father and then to William and Catherine, as Mog was allegedly 2 weeks overdue. That means, if I count back, that she was also allegedly about 12 weeks pregnant at the time of Eugenie's wedding, which in effect means that Mog must have fallen pregnant early to mid July, barely 2 months after the wedding. However, Harold tells how desperate they were to conceive, so desperate that they consulted an Ayurvedic doctor who helped them conceive. According to Harold, she told them Mog's weight loss was the reason why she wasn't conceiving and told her to gain 5 pounds. Well, that is certainly interesting, but sadly, I have to call BS on that story as well, unless a fertility doctor is now also an Ayurvedic doctor or practitioner. However, having said that, in England, Ayurveda is not an officially accepted and licensed form of medicine, and therefore only licensed medical doctors who are trained in Ayurveda can legally practice it as part of their medicine or medicinal practice. But remember, in the 2 months between the wedding and Mog supposedly falling pregnant, they were on honeymoon for 10 days. They attended Charles's garden party. Mog traveled to see her mother and friends. And Mog certainly did not look underweight, bulimic, or anorexic the few times she was indeed seen during those 3 months or 2 months. But then I also consulted two different medical journals to find out whether a weight loss of about 5 pounds or even gaining 5 pounds would make a major difference to fertility. And the answer is no. Actually, unless you are severely anorexic or with a BMI, body mass index, of under 18.5, losing weight raises a woman's chances of falling pregnant as it helps cycles to return to normal. A healthy body weight, even if slightly on the low side, and a healthy diet helps a woman conceive, not scoffing down as much shepherd's pie as you can, as Harold said Mog did. So all in all, I think this was yet again another fabrication from the potty mouth of Mog, Megain, Mimi, Megan, Markle. The same category of story as her visiting a Korean nude spa with her mother, or South Africans dancing in the streets celebrating their marriage, or a pilot kneeling next to her thanking her for her service, or the wedding 3 days before the wedding, or Archie's room being on fire in the housing project they stayed in here in South Africa. Yes, that kind of story. Interesting, but fictitious. Harold continues the fantasy. According to Harold, the newspapers reported that Mog suffered fatigue and dizzy spells, especially in the mornings. But according to Harold, nothing could be further from the truth. Mog was a dynamo during the Australian tour, says Harold. According to Harold, Mog did so well on the tour that he warned her she was doing too well. And according to Harold, he was indeed right, because soon after their return, this story started, the Tiara Gate story, the Mog made Kate cry story, and so forth. According to Harold, they called for another summit with William and Catherine, this time on their turf, as he calls it. According to Harold, it was at this point in time he discovered that the leaks were coming from William's office, and that William was indeed aware of it. According to Harold, it became clear that someone or multiple someones in the palace had it in for old Mog. Yes, Harold indeed accuses William's office of leaking stories like, and I quote, Mog's bra strap was showing, her nails were painted black, etc. Okay? Now, reading through it makes Harold sound completely delusional, paranoid, and very immature. Honestly, can someone please explain to Harold that the office did not have to leak these kind of things? We all have eyes to see for ourselves, and indeed, we could see her dark painted nails and we could see the bra showing. I mean, we didn't need anyone to leak or tell us that. But anyway, Harold talks about how he called Granny to tell her that Nottingham Cottage was falling down around their heads. And just like with William and Catherine, now that they had two rambunctious dogs and a baby on the way, they will have to start talking about alternative accommodation, just like William and Catherine were upgraded. Well, again, not really accurate, as William, Catherine, and baby George actually lived in Nottingham Cottage for a while. As a matter of fact, they lived in Nottingham Cottage from just after their marriage in 2011 until October 2013. William and Catherine redecorated the cottage with the help of interior designer Kelly Hoppen and continued to live there after George's birth and until, as I said, October 2013, when they moved to apartment 1A in Kensington Palace. But of course, William and Catherine also rented a home in the Bordogan estate in Wales at the time and split their time between the two homes. So Harold had to do the same and rented a home for him and Mog in Oxfordshire. Anyway, Granny agreed and offered them Frogmore. And at first there was a bit of miscommunication, and Harold thought they were offered Frogmore house. But Granny corrected him and said, no, 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 Frogmore cottage. Frogmore cottage had been converted into staff apartments, but Granny was indeed willing and agreeable to turn it back into a single dwelling, because at the time Frogmore cottage needed renovation anyway. So while the renovations were happening, Harold and Mog basically stayed in Oxfordshire permanently. That is, until Harold's paranoia again got the better of him. According to Harold, they were alerted to the fact that there were stories in the Sun and the Daily Mail accompanied by overhead shots of their Oxfordshire home. Well, yes, I saw those, but Harold goes on to say that paparazzi were hanging out of helicopters and aiming telephoto lenses at windows, including the bedroom window. Well, I have not seen any of those photographs, and as far as I'm concerned, that sounds a bit like 007 kind of stuff and not like just some kind of paparazzi taking photographs. But as always, had Harold stopped with the truth and not embroidered on the truth and added to the story, I would have shrugged and said, okay. But as always, he took it a step further, which made it a bit fantastical. Okay? Harold then tells of finding Mog sobbing on the floor again, wanting to die, but how they went to Cirque du Soleil at the Albert Hall instead. Then he talks about the text from Jason informing him that the Mail on Sunday printed an extract from Mog's letter to her father. And Harold tells how Mog inscribed wedding and birthday cards to pay her rent. Okay. But never mind. Harold freaks out. Even in the book, he follows this up with tantrums. He does not want advice, does not want to hear about protocol or strategy. No, no, no. All he wants to do is sue, and Mog wants to sue. But Pa, William, and the advisors are not too keen. But anyway, nowhere in the entire chapter does Harold once mention that the letter had in fact been leaked by his wife's friends in the first place. And no, there is no place for the truth in Harold's narrative, especially not around this subject. From that, he jumps to the fight with William. According to Harold, William called the meeting and Mog was out of town visiting friends, so he came over to Nottingham Cottage. William was indeed upset. Mog was rude and abrasive and has by then alienated half of the staff, but Harold played the patient, indulgent brother, asking William to cut her some slack while she is adjusting to a new office, new country, and new culture. Now, reading this, I could understand why William's emotions and anger escalated, because clearly Harold was not prepared to discuss the issues and maybe work towards a solution. No, 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 no. He actually says it in so many words. He wanted William to turn a blind eye. So obviously, William got frustrated, grabbed his brother, and pushed him out of frustration, and obviously then broke poor Harold's necklace. Afterwards, Harold called his therapist, something he couldn't do a chapter earlier when his wife threatened suicide. So please explain that to me. What I wish to mention here, and which I think is rather important, is Harold's reaction to this fight with his brother. Even recalling the fight during an interview, Harold's facial expression, body language, and language deteriorate to that of a child. I don't know whether it's just me or whether you notice that as well. Now, I find this very concerning and, in my opinion, a clear indication of his mental decline. As William said, in the past, Harold would have fought back, but now he acted like an airy-fairy prophet, afraid of his own shadow. Very strange indeed. At one point, I was convinced that Harold had frontal lobe damage, but at this point, and reading this far, I'm not so sure anymore. As I'm nearing the end of the book and pause to reflect, I think Harold's delusions and his struggle to differentiate between fantasy and reality are far more concerning than his inability to manage his emotions. I actually think he manages his emotions very effectively considering everything else, although not always appropriately. I think that it is actually Harold's saving grace that he is able to manage his emotions, particularly or at least in public. Maybe it's due to his training as a member of the royal family and then obviously in the army. But if it wasn't for the fact that Harold could keep his emotions in check to the extent that he is doing in public, I think he may have been locked in an asylum a long time ago. It is no longer guesswork or speculation, but a very obvious fact that Harold is suffering from some mental illness. And I personally cannot predict the future outcome of his illness. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are nearing the subject of the actual birth of the children, and I think it's time, my dear friends, that the palace and the Harkles are held accountable to, at the very least, answer the remaining and legitimate questions. So this time we'll approach the subject more clinically, and the video will be accompanied by other material for your use. But until then, we have a few other things to discuss as well. So until we meet back here for the next video, please take care of yourselves. Bye.